On February 14th, 2003, Olive Gardens across America saw an uptick in business as star-crossed lovers would swoon at each other over endless breadsticks and substandard pasta. Okay, I don't know if that's actually true or not. Did we have endless breadsticks in 2003, or am I crazy? What I do know happened on that day is the release of the Game Boy Advance SP, a handheld console that would revolutionize gaming and ruin sleep patterns across the world, mine included. But in my own little world, that console did so much more than ruin my sleep schedule. I don't think I would have survived my teens without it, and really, I don't think my relationship with gaming to this day would be the same without it. And I want to talk about it. If you would have told my 5-year-old gray brick murder weapon Game Boy having ass that one day there would be a Game Boy that folded in half with a light up screen, I would have thought you were insane, told you as much, and then went back to playing Donkey Kong or Kirby Star Stacker or whatever I had in that beefy boy at the time. But sure enough, after multiple iterations of the Game Boy, including the Game Boy Pocket and the Game Boy Color, which blew people's minds as it was, the Game Boy Advance came out swinging with a substantial leap in looks and gameplay, with one simple shortcoming: the requirement of light. As a kid, I got taken on a couple of cross-country road trips to visit family, and every time I wanted to play a handheld at night while on the road, I'd have to throw a blanket over my head, get my knees up, and then put the Game Boy in my lap and hold the blanket with one hand and the flashlight with the other, and like situate the blanket so it wasn't getting too tight on me, and like so I could still see the Game Boy, and then use my free hand to try to play what I was playing. It was pretty restrictive to like Pokemon games, which was fine because I was more than content to play yellow and blue version over and over and over and over again. But when I was much younger, as much as I loved playing video games, really all they were was just a way to pass the time. But they would become so much more to me the older that I got. I got my first SP when I was about 13 years old. At that age, the only person I really considered a good friend had ended up transferring to private school because, well, the motherfucker was a baby genius, and to be honest with you, way too smart to go to school where I did. So I was generally pretty lonely. I was in band and I played a lot of sports, but none of those extracurricular activities helped me make any friends, which made me feel even more lonely. I was fortunate enough to have and still have loving parents. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. But as far as people I could really connect with and share interests with, I was kind of shit out of luck, because when you're an awkward-ass, ADHD-riddled kid that gets relentlessly bullied at a constant, it's not the easiest to make friends. And that's when video games truly became more of an escape and less of, you know, just a way to pass time. But because of all the extra shit I was doing, on top of going to school and trying to spend time with my family, I didn't have much time during the day to play video games. Enter the SP, because who the fuck needs sleep when you have a Game Boy Advance that folds in half and the screen lights up? Are you shitting me? Like most kids, I had a bedtime that would be sufficient enough to get me about 8 hours of sleep before having to go to school. That 8 hours sometimes turned into 6. Sometimes it even turned into 4, depending on the night, except for the nights that I was too eager to start playing games, and I would pretend I was extra sleepy so I could hop in bed and play The Sims Bustin' Out. Yes, there is a Game Boy Advance version of that game that I'm gonna talk about, and I have yet to meet anyone else that's played it, so please let me know if you have. What's interesting for me, though, is once I started using the night to escape into these handheld worlds, I didn't really take my SP many other places, with the exception of, say, a long-ass bus ride for a marching band function or another road trip with family. And for times like that, I would take games that I could generally just pick up and put down, like NFL Quarterback Club, Ken Griffey Jr.'s Major League Baseball, or Rainbow Six. But certain worlds I wanted to experience for myself and only myself. a place that I could be safe and without any distractions or disturbances. That's what really made me fall in love with gaming more than anything else. Like, yes, Metal Gear Solid has been my favorite video game of all time since the day I played it. How many, God, oh my gosh, that was over 25 years ago. My bones slowly turned to dust. And that came out well before the SP. But I'd be embellishing if I said a game like that was something that I was immersed in, or that it was a world that I felt I could exist in. It's still my favorite game of all time for many reasons. But today I want to talk about the first set of worlds that I truly dove into. Like, my imagination went crazy enough that I felt like my eyeballs went into the screen and in that world for me to explore. Now, I know this video is about the Game Boy Advance SP. I will warn you now, 2 of the 3 games are not Game Boy Advance games. They are Game Boy Color games. They just happen to be Game Boy Color games that I played way more of once I had an SP. Also, I am like less than a day removed from being sedated for dental stuff, so I apologize in advance if I sound spacey or talk funny, but I've been so eager to make this video, and so I'm just saying fuck it and throwing caution to the wind. Pokemon Gold is the second game in a series of... How fucking many Pokemon games are there? Hold on a sec. Mainline Pokemon games. There's fucking 40? Yes, 40. I double checked. And after having dumped at least 100 hours or so in both Pokemon Blue and Yellow, my gold cartridge, I'd argue, got like twice, if not 3 times the mileage, because not only did they add 100 more Pokemon, but they also added an entire new map to explore, along with the original map, giving you a massive journey to enjoy. And yes, this game had enough replay value to me that by the time I had an SP, I was still playing it, because the SP fundamentally changed everything about this game to me. I was always a good and honest gamer when I was a kid, and I would always set the in-game clock to be the actual time of day, so it was really rare for me to experience the night cycle in-game. But in bed at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday was when I could finally go on a moonlit Pokemon adventure, which unlocked the true potential of that little cartridge when it came to escapism. Playing Pokemon Gold by the light of my backlit screen, it felt like I was sneaking off into the night for an unforgettable adventure. And that added much more replay value because I got to see different Pokemon at night. One thing that I still find charming about this game to this day is the addition of the Poke Gear. You know, radio stations to listen to and a phone where every person in your contacts was almost always excited to hear from you, and it just made the experience that much nicer. So when there was no warmth to be found in the real world by day, I found warmth in Gold at night. I did play a fair amount of Emerald and Fire Red as well, because it was still cool to see where Pokemon games were heading with what the Game Boy Advance had to offer, but man, for me, they just didn't hit quite like Gold. What's funny is a year or so ago, I was gifted a DS Lite and a copy of Heart Gold from my homie Taiga's personal collection because it was deemed a misdemeanor that I hadn't experienced my childhood favorite with all of the bells and whistles of a quality of life overhaul. And what keeps happening is every time I play this game, I want to play it in bed because that's like the nostalgia factor. It's like, oh, I used to play this in bed all the time, yeah. And then I'll go to play it in bed, turn the console on, walk like 10 steps, and then fucking fall asleep. I think part of that is just me being 34 years old and employed. So when my sleepy ass lays down for bed, my brain goes, oh, sorry, were you in the middle of something? Don't care. But I think the actual root is the fact that I just feel comfortable and safe in a way I can't really put into words when I boot up that game at bedtime. I guess I'm just gonna have to start trying to play it during the day if I actually want to get through it. International Track and Field is a game that for the longest time I was convinced that only I ever played, but YouTube has like 3 playthroughs of this game, so there's at least a handful of us, right? What we're working with here is a button mashing sports game that has the ghost of Atlas's future duct taped to its face. What I mean by that is, if you choose to play the story mode, if you're not playing the active part of the game where you're mashing A and B like your life depends on it, you're basically playing a Persona game, a la time and schedule management, socializing, and even romancing. All of these elements being featured in a game about running fast and throwing heavy shit on the Game Boy Color in 1999? What the fuck? And all of these systems were surprisingly competent and in-depth. It wasn't just a matter of, all right, let me spam all these training exercises so I can get buff fast, because you had power and stress meters that you had to maintain, otherwise you'd risk getting injured. And if you get injured, you have to spend all this time in bed and you start losing points that you gained towards leveling your skills. So self-care is extremely important if you want to make your progress matter. Things like scheduling days off to chill at home or going out with friends to reduce your stress, they're necessary to keeping on a fast track to success. I never confirmed if having a girlfriend in the game has any sort of mechanical advantage, but I did it anyways because, one, both girls that you have as options are cute as fuck, and it's really funny if you decide to try and date both of them, inevitably get caught, and then have them both get really mad at you and dump you in stereo. And I don't recall how you start dating your teammate, but one of the options is one of the trainers, and your relationship starts when you save her from getting hit by a fucking car. This game is ridiculous, and I love it so dearly. I played through this game a couple dozen times because it's only about a 5-hour playthrough, but man, I just couldn't get enough of it. I'm a pretty competitive person, so the core gameplay is satisfying enough as is because I'm always going to want to outdo my personal bests and crush my competition. But the fact that they stuffed a college kid's life into this game, that is what had me coming back to it. I played a fair amount of sports through school, and I kind of hated every second of it because I didn't get along with most people on the teams. But in this game, I was surrounded by teammates that, even though success in this genre of sport leans more on individual performance, despite that, all of the people I was surrounded by wanted me to succeed, which was a significantly more ideal experience than what I was getting outside of the comfort of my room. The Sims Bustin' Out wasn't the first Sims game I had ever played at the time, but it's the only one I really enjoyed. I wasn't super into life sim games when I was younger, so that's probably why. And especially because The Sims Bustin' Out on Game Boy Advance isn't a life sim game. You start the game by tossing a character together with about as many cosmetic options as you would expect from the beginning of a Game Boy Advance game. You set up your stats, for lack of a better term. And then you get dropped off at your Uncle Hayseed's place, and he's just like, all right, kid, here's how to live, here's how to make friends, now be my friend and fix all this busted bullshit so you can live in my barn until you get on your feet. From there, you play mini games to earn a living, talk to relatively one-note yet slightly kooky NPCs where you can get them to love you or despise you if you learn their personalities well enough, upgrade your living arrangements via story progression, and fill those living arrangements with an Amazon wish list worth of ridiculous garbage. As you progress, you begin unlocking different areas of the game that would eventually open up into a surprisingly large pseudo-open world for a game crammed onto a tiny little Game Boy Advance cartridge. And with the amount of things to see, people to talk to, and games within the game to play, this handheld world feels alive and bustling. I spent so much time befriending every single character in town, hitting max level on every single job minigame like slinging root beers to bikers, or going fishing off the pier, or even fucking cliff diving. Buying up catalogs worth of nonsense so I could deck out my apartment or house. And sometimes I would just take my dang scooter and ride around town just to drive around, the same way I would once I eventually got my grubby little paws on Grand Theft Auto 3, that fucking monstrosity. Sim Valley, as silly as it might sound, felt like more of a hometown than my actual hometown. I felt wanted there. I felt like I could be somebody there. I felt like when I went to that world, there were people there that were happy to see me and to help achieve people that wanted me to help them achieve their goals. I'm not getting emotional over a fucking Game Boy game, I swear.
Don't let these tears fool you. There's all dog around this mug. I'm good.
I know all of this might sound silly to some people because not everyone has the same childhood as the dopey side character kid in cartoons that's always getting shoved into lockers in every cutaway scene. But it got better. I swear it got better. Listen, anyone that has ever told you, I promise it gets better, trust me, believe me, please believe me, it gets better. I'd eventually start making more friends later in high school, once I was in marching band and got out more often. And that actually led to me playing my SP a lot less because I didn't need it for what I was using it for as much. And then for some reason, I think my junior or senior year in high school, an Xbox and a TV was added to my bedroom, and I would just play Burnout Revenge until my eyes bled, because apparently I thought that was a good idea. But even then, if I ever found myself heading to bed on a sour or sad note, I always had my favorite worlds I could dive back into. Obviously, I don't know a ton of people who think of early 2000s handhelds when it comes to talking about immersive gameplay, and I'm perfectly fine with being the weirdo that does. But I do know a ton of people that at least understand how comforting it can be to have video games as an escape. I still use games to escape to this day into interesting and unique worlds. I just do it on a computer now. And there's a long list of more modern games that I've found myself endlessly immersed in, and they're gonna be a major topic of discussion on this channel. Games like Cloudpunk, Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartending, and Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood, which shouts out to Deconstructeam and Fingerspit. Thank you so fucking much for giving me permission to use your music on this video. And yes, all of the games that I just mentioned and so many more also make me cry when I think about them for too long. But before I could cover any of those games, I needed to talk about the first set of games that I truly lost myself in, which again, might sound crazy to some people that I was getting lost in a game like International Track and Field or The Sims busting out on Game Boy Advance, but it was never about graphical fidelity or mechanical polish or some grand spectacle. It was just about having a safe space to myself and a world to explore. I gotta know, am I actually the lone weirdo here, or did any of y'all find yourself escaping into handheld games too? If you did, let me know which ones. Also, I didn't know I was gonna get this emotional doing this video. That did honestly kind of take me by surprise. I certainly didn't get this emotional when I wrote it, but I guess just really sitting down and thinking about it, it really did bring all of those comforting feelings back. But thank you so much for watching this video. Cancel your Spotify subscription, and I'll see you soon.